So hello and welcome to this Technology Connections 2 video, which is off to a very rocky start, but will smooth out shortly. There we go. We're getting there. So this is the follow-up video to, oh man, it's much worse. This is the follow-up video to the Technology Connections video on this system, which is a Disney PeopleMover based on, well, it is the Disney Wedway PeopleMover technology that was built at the George Bush Intercontinental Airport in Houston, Texas. If you haven't seen that previous video, you should check it out because it goes over the history of the Wedway PeopleMover and how exactly this technology got in Houston, though really we didn't come to a very strong answer on that, but probably due to just stuff. You know, stuff happens. Anyway, let's start with a map of the Houston airport. Oh, look at that, a map of the Houston airport. So, the George Bush Intercontinental Airport, which goes by the call sign IAH, or YA, is an airport with 5 terminals, though you can see that really D and E are the same terminal building. It's just D is for international departures, and E is just for domestic departures. And you can see that it's serviced by both the Skyway and the Subway. The Subway, which you just saw, stops at the Marriott Hotel, and the Skyway does not. That's because the Skyway is on the sterile side of the airport, meaning past security. We'll begin by taking a look at the Skyway and some of the other things that didn't get mentioned in the video. So one of the things that I noticed when I was at the airport, but I didn't know why yet, was that terminals B and C had much older feeling stations than terminals A or D and E. And it turns out that's because they are the oldest stations. I had no idea this was the case, but Continental Airlines, which is now part of United, or I guess they are United. I don't know how exactly that merger went. But anyway, they used to have a lot of gates in terminals B and C. So they actually built this PeopleMover system to connect travelers between those two terminals so they didn't have to exit security. And that was it opened in 1999. Then what happened was in 2001, the system was expanded to Terminal D. And keep in mind, that's also Terminal E now. I guess back then it was just Terminal D. It's not clear who paid for that. On Wikipedia, it doesn't really mention it, although perhaps the citation does, but I'm being lazy. Forgive me. And then in 2008, the airport themselves financed an extension to Terminal A. So it wasn't until 2008 that the entire airport was actually serviced by the Skyway.
El tren se acerca a la terminal C. Por favor, sujétese bien. El tren está saliendo a las terminales D, E y edificio de llegadas internacionales.
So you can probably already see that now we are approaching Terminal D and E, and it's a very different design from the station we just left. I'm not sure if you can, I didn't notice when I was there, though now with the benefit of hindsight, it might be easier to see an actual separation in the track that indicates, because this section of track is effectively newer than what we were just on. And so this was the first extension and the second of the station openings, I guess you could say. Interesting thing about this system, you can see the stoplights on the bottom right. That would be for a driver who's manually driving the trains, and you'll actually kind of see that in just a bit. But I find it interesting that they have all of those stoplights there. I mean, I guess, I'm more surprised that they use them when the system's in automated mode. I don't know what they would signify, but I suppose they're probably useful for diagnostics or something. So this is a view of the system, and this is kind of a bit behind the scenes as far as how I think when I make YouTube videos. So when I made the remark about O'Hare's system crossing sides so that way there could be a continuous loop of trains, I said that that's interesting, but it's certainly not unique. And there are people who may think that I meant unique. And by showing this clip, I'm hoping to prevent those comments from happening. Of course, they're going to happen because that's how YouTube comments work. But I did want to include this clip that at Houston, the same thing happens. So that way there can always be trains going both directions. And you can see that this system is actually run really well, like clockwork, because already there's a new train coming. In general, it seemed to be the wait times for a new train, no matter where you were 90 seconds or less. One thing about this system, and I've noticed this in Florida too, is that the trains suck at lining themselves up correctly with the platform doors. You can see here that the train's off by like at least a foot, maybe even 18 inches. I'll put metric conversions up there. And it's just surprising to me how this is an automated system. You'd think it could stop more correctly, but they don't. So that's interesting. Is that really necessary at any time? As you come up the elevator on Terminal A and D and E, you have this nice observation platform that you can actually watch the trains from. So that's where I got the original footage. Now, I like that this airport includes this because it's encouraging observation of the system, or at least it seems like it. Whereas at Orlando, they don't like you watching things. Yeah, I'll explain that in a little bit. Here you can see on the signs, the next train is in 75 seconds and one just left. So this system really runs quite well. There's almost never a wait for a train. Let's see how closely it lines up.
Please keep clear for passengers exiting the train.
El tren está por llegar. Por favor, permita espacio para los pasajeros que salen del tren.
Not quite. There's the Bombardier badge on the door there. Interestingly, on Wikipedia, they list this system as being operated by Johnson Controls, but I saw a lot of employees there working for Bombardier, and you're about to see that. So at this point, you'll notice our train's not actually stopped at the station. It's right before the doors. So we're moving forward, and you can see that other train on the spur line there, and it has its doors open. At this station, this guy got on our train. You can see he's wearing a Bombardier backpack, and he opened up this panel. I snuck a picture. So you can see that what the panel shows is it's basically, I couldn't get a great picture, but he's hitting buttons that are either max propel or minimum propel, and there's also a reverse button and a brake button. I don't know what the emergency button might do, but essentially he just has to put in that key, turn it from auto to manual, and then he can drive the train. The buttons above his hand appear to be for opening and closing the doors, and I'm going to guess that's an emergency stop button at the top. I think I can see the word emergency, but anyway, this is a neat thing I was able to sneak a picture of. I just happened to be there at the right time, and they were doing something. Another neat thing about here in Houston is that between terminals B and C, because remember that's the original installation, is where the maintenance shed is, where they keep extra vehicles and do whatever maintenance they need. But I really like that the middle, well, not the middle, but the farthest sticking out one, that's like a car wash for them. So I had remarked to myself that these trains were really, really clean. And I know from their design that they're the same as the Orlando ones, so I figured they're probably not actually that new. But, you know, they can keep them, they can run them through a car wash, which I think is, you know, it's really neat. Anyway, that's enough looking at the Skyway. Let's take a look at some extra stuff in the subway. So one of the things I'll show you here is how a lot of lines that I recorded here were just like thought up on the spot, and I didn't even use them, and or I used them differently. So you're going to hear me say the same sort of thing a few times, but it's just got some interesting shots behind it, so I threw them in here. Part of what's so weird about this subway is that you can just walk the whole distance. Now, granted, it's kind of a long distance, but you could do that. Part of what's so weird about this system is that you can just walk right along it, and there's only a half wall separating you and the train. I think the weirdest thing about this system is that you can just walk right next to it and it'll go right past you. It's a nice breeze. Here at Terminal A is apparently where they have a little maintenance bay. Focus is struggling. Yeah, there we go. One of the things that's harder to convey about these things in video, which hopefully you'll be able to see, is that they're much larger than a PeopleMover train, much more so than I thought. They say the maximum capacity is 12. There's a decent amount of standing room, and the bench would probably sit 3 across tightly. So they're a lot more modified from the Disney PeopleMover design than I thought they were. But from what I can tell, the speed is exactly the same. It's a little hard to tell because these aren't open air. Just gonna chime in here and say that they might actually be a little faster. Yeah, if this isn't a little derpy, I don't know what is. This is my first time I've ever been to Texas, and some pretty neat stuff here. I'm also wearing a mic, so I wonder how people might think I'm kind of weird.
Please pay particular attention to your luggage and personal belongings. Unattended luggage and personal belongings will be treated as a danger to the facility. Do not be persuaded by strangers or individuals you do not know well to take articles aboard your flight.
It's dangerous.
We appreciate your cooperation. These measures are in effect.
I haven't found evidence of it. Look at that. I will say that the few existing YouTube videos I've seen of this system were very dark and dingy looking, and it appears that they've upgraded the lighting down here because it feels much less dank. Okay, this part's kind of dark and creepy. At least there's comforting music. Part of me is like, how is this even allowed? Because I mean, here, I'm standing. This is like my normal height of my hand. It's maybe 3.5 feet. Oh, I'm bad at this. It's just very weird. And like I said, I mean, you can walk this hallway. There's definitely no problem. But it's just weird. Okay, so that looks like a pneumatic brake. Maybe that's what stops them at the stations. Well, I think that answers that question. So, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that this is actually longer than Disney's PeopleMover. And it's also curious, there's a lot of air brakes that are able to stop it. That one just opened there. So I wonder why they have that many air brakes. So I sort of discovered why. Somehow a safety spiel was triggered by a vehicle that wasn't actually stopped. You can kind of hear it here. Oh! Interesting. So this is like an emergency stop zone or something. So you can see at this end, this is the end, and there is not a station on this side. It just loops around. The only station is over on this side. I hope he's not making a YouTube video. I'm pretty sure I qualify as one of the weirder tourists in the world, but I got off at the Marriott Hotel, and one thing that I had no clue about is that this level is open. Down there is the subway. So it's kind of like an atrium. I got off, this was LL, I thought it was lobby level, but apparently it's lower level. There's some meeting rooms around here. I'm in the North Tower, apparently. I bet if I look at some signs, I can figure this out. It even had a star next to it. I'm terrible. It's quite nice here. You can still hear the subway down below. In fact, that's the stop right there. Weird. And let's see if double chime holds true. Oh yeah. But yeah, this is just so weird. Like, I know what this is, and I suppose many people don't. Maybe that's why I think it's weird. But just the whole idea, like, oh yeah, there's a door, but you could also just jump over this thing and get onto the track. Why have the door? And also, I think that Disney's concept of having the chain of them moving through a station with the moving walkway so it never stops, it'd be harder to pull off with baggage, but I don't think it'd be impossible. I'm forgetting about wheelchairs here. That would be difficult. So let's talk about the motors for a little bit, because there's something that maybe you've already noticed but is interesting about their placement, and that is that each adjacent motor appears to be flipped around. So the motors have two parts. There's like a ribbed part that's inset within another box. I think that ribbed part is the actual motor itself, and the cover is possibly just covering the electrical connections, but is also probably covering the vehicle presence sensor. And the thing is, these motors are not going to be run all the time. They're only going to switch on when they detect a train above them, because it would be pretty wasteful if they were running current through them all the time. They'd probably burn out even. But so I suspect, because here's the thing that I suspect. In Tomorrowland, when I mentioned that there are PeopleMover collisions, the reason I think that happens is if you look at the induction motors on the PeopleMover, you can see next to them there's a little like U-shaped piece, and I believe that's the vehicle presence detector. And if the ride has been stopped, which does happen occasionally for in case there's something in the station, like someone is having difficulty getting in and out of the train, they do have to turn it off. And so, or they do have to stop the ride. So if the ride has been stopped and your train happens to land right where none of those vehicle presence sensors are tripped, your train just won't move because none of the motors under you think there's a train on top of it. So yeah, the power will come back to the track, but nothing happens. And part of me wonders if here each motor is turned around because it decreases the likelihood of that happening. Or yeah, I don't know exactly why that would be, but I did find it interesting that each adjacent motor is turned around from the ones next to it. What we're coming up to now used to be a station, but it has since been decommissioned. Here's a better shot of that decommissioned station. This was for parking area 2. I don't know why exactly they decided to stopping the trains here. I'm guessing it's just it wasn't ever a popular station. But what is also notable is that on this side, all of the door hardware is still there, and you can still see out, and it's still labeled parking area 2. But on the other side, it's all been boarded up, and it looks like the doors have been removed. I wonder if that was to cannibalize parts from those door mechanisms or what. And one thing that I regret not doing on this trip was actually walking by here to get a better look, and I didn't, so oops. Another interesting thing is right here. The track looks like it used to go to the right around this stairwell and then come back, but it has since stopped. Wonder why.
You are at Terminal A. Hold on to the handrail. Your next stop will be Terminal B.
So here's just some more footage on the train, this time looking out to the side. As you can see at Terminal A, this is the other end of the station, so you turn around at this point basically. And once the trains are on a straightaway, they are moving at a pretty decent pace. I'd say this is kind of like a running speed. I don't want to say it's definitely not like a sprinting speed, but if I were walking alongside the trains, they definitely pass me up pretty easily. Even a brisk walk, these trains would be faster than that. So I want to say it's about a running speed, maybe a jogging speed, I don't know. But if I were to equate to miles per hour, I think these trains are going maybe 10 or 12 miles per hour. Here's just another shot that shows how fast they're going.
En la terminal A, agarre la baranda de apoyo.
I didn't even notice that happened in the camera. That's why I just turned around and was like, oh, there's a dude that walked across the tracks. And then I questioned my life choices and looked at the ceiling a bit. So let's talk about the doors. So my supposition as to how the door mechanism works is as follows. You can see in this still frame that there's a bit of a flat plate thing at the bottom of the doors that's angled downward slightly. Now, I believe that that actually unlocks the door when it's pushed up. So you can see as we approach this station here, and I'm about to freeze frame, this is the best freeze frame I got, there's this little grabby thing at the bottom of the door, and my guess is you can see it's in two parts, and I think the bottom part lifts up, pushes up on that bar, and it squeezes it. And you can see here, you can see the bar inside the door, and now it's not angled down anymore, it's actually angled slightly up. So I've got another view of that here. Here's that bar again. You can see it's not angled down like it was in the picture. It's now kind of straight out. So I think that that mechanism grabs the door, pushes up on it, which unlocks it, and then pulls the door open. The other complication is you can see this red door hold button inside the train. I don't know exactly how that would communicate to the door mechanism to keep it open, but if that grabby thing is grabbing a pair of electrical contacts, it could be that pushing that button actually shorts them out. It could be as simple as that. I don't really know. Waiting at the Marriott for the subway. So this is going to be hard to show because I wasn't filming the doors, but if you look in the reflection of the window, you can see that the doors just closed, but then they opened again because it didn't actually shut all the way. It had to reopen and shut a second time. That was interesting. And then this last shot here of the maintenance bay, I also noticed, and you may have seen it, it's in other places, but there are these indicator lights here. And I don't know what exactly they indicate because there isn't a train in A right now. And I can't see B, but I think there was one light for each stop. And then there's also a couple of giant 5-volt power supplies. So yeah, they do something.
The train is leaving. Please hold on.
So now we bring you back to O'Hare because I wanted to talk a little bit about this PeopleMover system because it's actually rather interesting and unique. So in O'Hare, they use the VAL system, and it's a French system. It was designed originally in the 1980s, and one of the more unique things, I guess you could say, is rather than the systems like you see in Orlando and Houston, the cars aren't really guided by a center rail. I believe what you're seeing in the center is actually an electrical bus bar. I think it's like a third rail. There are side friction tires, and you can see as we come through the switch here that there are beams on either side of the track, and they're basically centering the vehicle, and that's how it's being guided. I don't really know what the advantages or disadvantages are to that system, but what is noteworthy about it is that at O'Hare and only one other place in the world, and that's Taipei, Taiwan, they used VAL 256 vehicles, which are the widest variety that were ever made. So basically only 2 places in the entire world have had these exact trains. And you may be thinking to yourself, that might cause a problem. And it kinda did, because as the system is being replaced, Bombardier has actually had to make a new version of the Innovia APM vehicles to fit this guideway. They already did it in Taipei. Those vehicles were replaced maybe about 10 years ago. So they now have the Innovia APM 256, which is basically just to replace the VAL 256. But yeah, so that's an interesting little thing. It turns out that O'Hare's PeopleMover is extremely unique, and I'm probably going to get a bunch of comments about that in the first video if I haven't already. And another thing that you may have noticed is that O'Hare's landing doors, or the stations, can actually accommodate 3-vehicle trains, 3-car trains, but at the time that I wrote it, they only had 2-car trains because it's really not that well used. I was here when I filmed this. It was a weekday, and I came in the afternoon. The airport was pretty busy, but still not a lot of people were using the APM. But, or actually they call it the ATS. And here's a shot of that, which I forgot to add in the video because oops, so, but anyway, they do call it the ATS. Now it turns out the reason why they are expanding it to that new multimodal rental car facility is that currently, if you need to get a rental car, you have to get on a shuttle bus. And I guess they don't want the shuttle buses clogging up the drop-off areas at the airport, which makes a lot of sense. So when they built this new multimodal parking and rental car facility, the idea was it will be serviced by the ATS, and now all those shuttle buses can go away because everybody that needs a rental car will just get on the ATS, take it all the way to that end, and pick up their car there. And that's pretty smart. And now that I know that that was the purpose of the extension, you know, I think it makes a lot of sense, and hopefully it helps reduce congestion at the whatever you want to call the departures and arrivals areas. One of the things that the current, or I guess the past ATS suffered from were really bad announcements. They just had terrible quality. Take a listen.
The train is approaching the next station. Please hold on. Airline terminal number 3.
They're just clunky and they sound bad, and yeah, kind of an embarrassment actually. So here's a view at the back of the system, and you can see we're going to pass 6 doors, even though there's only 2 cars on this particular train.
This train serves airline terminal number 3, international terminal number 5, remote parking. The next stop serves airline terminal number 3.
If I were to guess why O'Hare used this system rather than the Bombardier APM 100 or something like that, is because this system was designed to actually work as a metro train, so for actual transit rather than just moving people. And at O'Hare, the remote parking and now the multimodal rental car facility are pretty far away from the terminals. So this quick trip getting from terminal 2 to 3 is, you know, you can walk that easily. You can just go down into the basement, walk over, and go back up to terminal 3. And so really the PeopleMover is not even necessary for getting people between the domestic terminals. You could just walk that. But both the international terminal, which is on the other side of the airport, and the rental car facility are far away, and these trains could go 50 miles an hour. So I had no idea they were going that fast, but now I'm less surprised at how quick they move, because it just, you know, it makes more sense in my head now. O'Hare wanted this because it's fast, and it actually is a fairly long track it has to traverse. Here we're going underneath the airport bridge. You can see the plane right there. So this is just on the way to the international terminal. We aren't even on the long stretch over to remote parking. And then this is leaving the international terminal to go over to remote parking. So when the new system comes online, supposedly the new trains and the new management system will be able to get trains coming much more frequently than they do, because I guess one of the concerns is if everybody has to get on the trains to get a rental car, then maybe it's going to really congest the system. But if they can get it down to, say, Houston times, or of a train every 90 seconds, I don't see why. I don't see how it's going to be overcrowded, because I'm presuming they're going to stick with 3 vehicle trains from now on, and you can see them right there. Those are the new ones. At the time when I filmed this, which was January 4th, I'm sure these trains were being tested, but they weren't in service yet. And also they have way more trains than they used to do. They used to have just 15 of the gray and red trains, but now they're going to have, I think, 36 of the Bombardier trains. And I should say there's 36 vehicles, so that's going to be 12 actual consists of trains. And here's the plaque from the company that actually built these trains. And kind of sad that they're not going to be in service anymore, but it's just a model that people didn't really buy. So now Bombardier will be taking care of O'Hare's needs for the next 25 years, and we'll see where we are in 2044. Holy crap, this video got way out of hand. If you made it this far, congratulations, and as your reward, here is the Orlando story. So, as I was filming the People Movers in Orlando, well, I had a run-in with the TSA. And basically, I was standing in the exit area of the People Mover waiting to film trains coming in. So at this shot where I was standing where someone, ordinarily is not going to stand, but they have these really great windows looking at the track of the People Mover. So I stayed there for a couple of cycles of the trains coming through. And a uniformed TSA agent came up to me and she was like, "Are you lost?" And I said, "No, I've been here many times before." And so I just happened to be done filming, so I started just walking with her to the front, but then she grabbed, I guess, her manager, who was not uniformed, and she was like, "I want to see your boarding pass." And fun story, I was traveling with family, so I left my bags and my boarding pass at the gate. And so I was like, "It's at the gate." And they were like, "We need to see your ID." So I was actually stopped by the TSA because they thought I was a suspicious person. And I won't say I was detained because it wasn't like we went to a special room or anything. This all just happened right by the People Mover. But yeah, I wasn't really expecting that. But that can happen if you're filming things in an airport. If I were smarter, I would have had my bag with me so it doesn't look like I'm just some weirdo that slipped past security, but part of me was tempted to ask them, "How do you think I got on this side if I don't have a boarding pass?" Something went very wrong if that happened, wouldn't you say? But I think that would have gotten me in much more trouble than I was already in. But anyway, I did it for you, and I hope you enjoyed this video and the main one on the main channel because it was a lot of fun. See you later.